There she
Here
is.
I am.
There you are. Hello,
Hello.
Dan.
It's so good
How are
to see
you?
you. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Living the dream. I am so busy. Brambleberry's doing this President's Day sale where like 20%, wait, everything on our website is 20% off. And when you and I scheduled this, it did not even cross my mind that the two were going on at the same time. So the warehouse is hopping and people are stocking up on all the essentials. Like Lye is our best seller right now because everybody's like, oh, 20% off of
Yeah,
essential. We'll do it. Yeah.
believe it. I got my order in this morning, so I was
Did
ready
you?
to take advantage of that.
Right, because it ends tonight. So that's how I'm doing. I'm like, oh yes, I need to look at the calendar before I schedule these lives. But I'm really excited to get to talk to you today about soap making and creativity and your soap making journey, and of course the unique way that you brand your products. And before we get started though, I would love to just like have you intro yourself just a little bit. Like how you got into soap making would be a great start.
Sure. So I've always been pretty involved in all different kinds of arts. I've always been very creative, and I found that a lot of them didn't hold my interest for a very long time. I would do them, and then I would feel like I was capable, and then I would sort of lose interest. And soap making is one of those arts that I think I've never actually fully mastered yet. Like it's always a little bit of a challenge. There's always something kind of new to learn. So I was first introduced to it by who I call my sister heart, one of my best friends, Whitney of Cheeky Goat Soapery.
Right.
She raises dairy goats, and she got me into it on a vacation visiting her. We tried to make some loaves in her house, and I was like, this is pretty fun. And then it was probably about a year and a half, 2 years later, I did it again visiting her, and was like, I need to go home and buy some of this stuff because this is really fun, and I wanted to get into it. And I love the idea of being able to kind of reduce some of the single-use plastics and single-use products in the home and have things that I made myself. I knew what was going into them. So I hadn't planned on it being a business when I first started doing it, but as friends and family got interested, and colleagues in work I would bring samples in for, I was like, oh, maybe I should do more with this. And so that ended in me incorporating in 2019, and it's been a crazy ride ever since.
That is awesome. I call soap making, I've always called it a consumable art form because
Yeah.
for me, it's a beautiful way to show creative expression that is also deeply useful.
Yes, and that's
So
been
it's,
one of the things I love about it. Yeah, is it's art that everyone needs and everyone wants and everyone will buy.
yeah, absolutely. And then it's a consumable. They need it all the time and they
Mhm.
need it over and over again. And so you're right, like it is endless in terms of what you can make, both from the ingredient standpoint, but also from the design standpoint.
Yep. No, it's really been really constantly engaging and always wanting to tips, try new things. It's held my interest for years now, and I don't see myself losing interest in it anytime soon. I really enjoy it.
Same. I was always a very multi-passionate crafter. I was a crafty girl. I did everything under the
Yep.
sun. Soap is the thing that stuck as well
Yeah.
for whatever reason. So you're in the Pacific Northwest, right?
I
Seattle
am. I'm
area.
in Seattle. Yeah, not too far from you guys.
And you have a really interesting day job. And so tell us about your day job.
I do. Again, something that has led me into the arts. So my day job is I'm an associate director for a cancer research program here at the University of Washington. So we partner with the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center and what was formerly the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, treating cancer patients. So the indication that I specialize in is sarcomas, which are connective tissue cancers. So kind of your cancers that aren't in an organ system. So it's like membranes, blood vessels, fat, bone, cartilage, and they're really difficult to treat. They're really rare. It has, unfortunately, a high mortality rate. It can be a really stressful job working with these patients and trying to give them new chances and new opportunities and really bonding with their families as we take care of them. So my team conducts clinical trials. So when a patient doesn't have any approved options for care for drug treatment, they often look at clinical trials for that. And that's what my program does. So we have a variety of options for patients in this indication. But as you can imagine, it's such a blessing that we get to provide care and help provide options and really get to know these patients and their families. But it's also very emotionally taxing. It's very draining. It's very stressful. It's a job where you really, I feel like we give 200% trying to make things better for people that are in really difficult situations. And when you get home, sometimes it's hard to leave that at work, right? Because you get so involved in it. And art has always been kind of an escape for me. That's been I can turn off my brain, I can make something, and I can unwind. And I think that's why I've been like a serial artist over the years, from one craft to another. And that's right now for me, soap making is that escape. That's what I do when I want to unwind or want to de-stress. And it's a nice marriage of something that's, I think, is very important and very valuable, but can be very high stress, with something that is absolutely freeing and fun and, you know, whimsical, and we can make whatever we want out of it. So
Yeah,
it's a good partnership for me.
that makes so much sense. I was a correctional officer back in the day, and I used to come home and make soap a lot, all the time, actually, just because it was what you see was what you got, what you inputted was really kind of what you got in an output, as opposed to being a correctional officer when there was a whole system to kind of fight against, and there was humans on the other side.
Yes,
so just because you put in a lot that day didn't mean that you got out what you wanted to out of the day. So I know that feeling. Soap making is such a creative outlet, and one of the things that drives us at Brambleberry is we believe that everyone is creative.
Yes.
And I think soap making is the ultimate creativity expression.
I would agree with that. I've had lots of friends that have come over who are like, "Oh, I'm not artsy at all. I'm not creative at all. I don't want to try." I'm like, "Just try, get your hands wet," and I'll, you know, set up something simple for them to make, and everyone loves it. They're always like, "Oh my God, that was so fun, and I have this really cool thing at the end," even if they're not sure how it's going to have turned out. It's always super cool. So yeah, I would agree. I think everyone's got creative in them as well.
Totally. And one of the things, so you and I think met in person for the first time at a live national TV show.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So tell us, so we were both on a TV show that was all about, like, it was almost an Iron Chef soap making competition, really. And that was super fun for me. I got to be a judge. So I had a totally different experience than you did. Tell us a little bit about the show, and, you know, and then give us the spoiler at the end about who won.
Exactly. Well, if there's one thing I can say that I learned from that, it was that I don't ever want to work in show business. I have so much respect for those camera crews, film crews, producers. Those days were long.
They were horrifically long. Yeah.
Even just for us who were coming, I'm sure for you as well, being on set, but it was those were 12 to 14-hour days, and we weren't doing a ton during those days. So I can only imagine what folks who do that full time for a living, filming shows and movies and things, do. I got a lot of respect for the film crews. I don't think I could hang in that career field. It was exhausting. But yeah, like you said, one of the coolest experiences, when I had put in the audition tape for the show, Meet Your Makers Showdown is what it was called. It's on Discovery Plus. When I had put in my audition tape for that, I didn't for one second think that I would get selected. I kind of was bullied into doing it by a friend of mine, by Whitney again. She's going to come up a lot. And I put it in and was just thrilled to be selected. I was with 3 other phenomenal makers. We had an absolutely fantastic time, both on set, off set, in the hotel, between takes. It was really, really cool. And yeah, spoiler alert, I was thrilled to be chosen as the winner of the series. I've actually got 2 of the soaps from the show here. Our lovely producer Jill actually sent 2 of them back to me from the batch. They kept most of everything, but I got 1 from each back, so those have gone on my like wall of treasures back here in my living room.
That's so great. It was, you know, it was so interesting being a judge, right? Because we were kept over in a separate area, and we weren't really allowed to see what you guys were doing.
Yes.
And so every time was a surprise. And what was really amazing to me was we had 2 celebrity judges, but how absolutely professional and talented and on the spot they were.
Oh my God, how great they were to meet. Like, yeah, so friendly and personable and down to earth.
Well, what was amazing to me is they'd be given a cue, because we had, you know, earpieces in and the like, and they'd be given a cue that was like, hey, try and incorporate this in. And they would just nail it on the first take. And I'd be like, how did you, whoa. Like,
yeah, nimble on their minds and nimble on their feet. And I guess that's what a lifetime in the industry will do for you, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and then Carrie and Leanne Rhymes were always harmonizing and singing together too in the back.
Oh, I wish I could have seen that.
And so I'd be like, oh, whoa, like, because they're both beautiful singers. And so that was, that experience was really fun, and it was really great to meet you. And it was hard to choose. It was actually impossible to choose a winner. It didn't feel good to choose a winner either. I didn't like it.
I know, it was so challenging. Everyone made such cool stuff. It's like it was super fun to get to do it. And, you know, obviously, like, I was proud of the soaps that I made, but what everyone else made was beautiful too. It was, I don't envy the shoes that you were in. I'm glad that I wasn't the one making the choice.
Well, and I felt like they also wanted me. I ended up would naturally be the bad guy because I knew technically what was going on. Whereas, like, it's not like Leanne Rimes knew technically what was going on. Although she was quite a candle maker. She was making candles before the show, and she's still making them. So she knows her way around a good scent and a good candle. But in terms of soap making and technicality, I was the only one that had any experience. So they depended on me to be like, oh, that got a little thick.
No pressure.
So I did not like that. So tell me, inspiration is something, we've talked a lot about creativity for the first few minutes. I'm really curious about where that inspiration for your creativity comes from.
Sure. It's kind of a multi-layered question to answer, I think, because it sort of comes from all around me. You know, I live in the Pacific Northwest. It's stunning up here. I'm blessed to be within a couple hours of glaciers and cliffs and forests and rainforest and you name it. And so I think a lot of my bars kind of take inspiration from either colors or designs or, you know, scenes that I've seen around me in nature. And then sort of trying to think outside of the box. I like to try and come up with something that maybe I haven't seen before, or try a new technique that maybe I haven't seen someone do, or to apply things in a different way. So I'm always looking for kind of where's that in of something maybe a little bit different. And then I think I take a lot of inspiration just from other soap makers too. I think it's really common to see artists look to other people and see ideas that maybe trigger something in their mind. I think while I don't like to reproduce exactly what other people have done, imitation is the finest form of flattery, as they may say. And so I'm always super flattered when I see someone who does a design that maybe is something I've made, or I try to kind of put my own spin on something that maybe I've seen that was inspired by something else. Also,
you created a really great recipe for Brambleberry last year. And so you gave a perfect scraping tool recipe, but then you also did an almost 30-minute video for us on our YouTube channel.
That was super
and
fun.
I've seen those soaps out in the wild, right? People taking your design, your ideas, and putting them out there. And I do think it's so inspiring to see the spin people put on it, but also that they're really successful with what appears to be a relatively challenging recipe and technique.
Yeah, that was probably the most rewarding part of doing that. Like, it was super fun to get to come up to the studio and meet your team, who are all A+ phenomenal folks to have worked with. But seeing over like the few months to the year after the video went out, getting tagged in people's posts and, hey, I did your technique, and they tagged me in it, or even I get questions through like my Insta DMs of, hey, I got this recipe from Brambleberry and I'm trying this tutorial, and, you know, I had a question about this. And so it was really, really cool to have that community engagement with kind of encouraging folks to reach out and just chat with me, because I'm always open to chatting with folks. If you have questions about soap, you can't stop me from talking about it.
Right.
But also to get to see lots of folks putting their own spin on it and trying things, or maybe trying a technique they wouldn't have otherwise tried because it looked too hard, to just jump in and give it a go. So it was really, really cool. Yeah, it was such a fun experience.
And that's one of the great things about the soap making community, is it truly is a community. And I think since there's such a wide variety of soaps that people make with such a huge amount of ingredients, different techniques, different niches that they're really targeting to, it lends itself to being a community and sharing, as opposed to back in fighting, like not sharing, right? A rising tide lifts all ships. And I really feel like the soap making industry and community it has that feeling of wanting to give.
I would agree. I've been in a lot of different art communities over the years, and the soaping community, and kind of just the home bath and body community in general, I think is one of the most collaborative, supportive. Hey, I'm having a problem with this. What do you guys think? Like brainstorming, working together, even with like friends and other soap makers I've made along the way who have like shared recipes or helped tweak things with me, or vice versa, where I've been able to help them. And I think there's this sense of community and collaboration that I haven't found in other art forms. I mean, even in some of the big Facebook groups, it's like everyone is generally so willing to help share ideas and expertise and technical tips that it encourages you to keep going and to keep diving into it. And it really kind of makes it feel even more worthwhile, because it's not just for you, it's for a community.
Oh, absolutely. And if someone that's watching this hasn't seen your soaps, I know that you're kind of far away from your camera, but can you like try and hold up some of your soaps?
Yeah.
Just kind of the intensity of just And then I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the prep work you do to make these soaps. Like how long does it take to prep, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So this is one of my favorites. This was actually done for one of the Soap Challenge Club tutorials that I taught last year. And I ended up making another winter version of it, which is this one, which is the same tools.
It's
and this is a sculpted layers technique, which is also what this one is, which is one from the show. So I can get the light so you can see them.
Lots of layers.
This is a view from Hurricane Ridge up here in Seattle. That's a landscape from a photograph. This was another challenge soap, which is a beach scene, kind of the breaking waves rolling in there under the moon.
It's gorgeous. Okay, so how long does it take you to prep for something like that? That beach waves with rolling under the moon. Like how long does that take you to prep?
It depends on the design. Sometimes I kind of jump in with a loose idea and just kind of pray that I get blessed by the soap gods and that what comes out of the mold is what I was picturing. But sometimes a lot of prep goes into it. For example, these kind of sculpted layer soaps take a lot of prep time in figuring out the design. I usually draw it out on paper, so I have what I want my layers to look like, and then I make my own scraper tools for the most part. This set was made for me by Belinda from Love Your Suds, who was fantastic to collaborate with. But these ones and the ocean soaps I made myself out of just plastic, like stencil plastic. And so then it's getting everything adjusted, making sure they all line up correctly. Obviously the soapy math that goes into figuring out how much I need for each batch. I think that's the part that probably most folks have the hardest time with, is knowing how much soap batter they need to make for the scrapes.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna plug myself here because I actually have a YouTube tutorial with a spreadsheet that does that for you. So I'm gonna give myself a little shameless plug there if you check out my YouTube. But I think that's the part that the challenges the most. And then as far as for my recipes, I tend to batch things. This is my whole space. As you can see, I'm in my kind of living room kitchen area. My kitchen is behind me here. I live in a really small apartment in Seattle, so all of my making happens in my home, which is just under 500 square feet. It's pretty tiny. So I do a lot of batching, and I have a batch prepped here to show you what I do with them. So I use these like food kitchen storage tubs, and I prep my hard oils and my solid oils, and I'll batch out like 10 or 12 of these at a time. So that I have them staged and ready to go, because that really helps with me not having a bunch of mess or having to hustle with all my ingredients out in the little bit of space that I have. So kind of making the most of the limited space and time has really helped me out a lot in being able to bump out some products.
That makes so much sense. It's a lot like Brambleberry's kind of quick mix. For example, I made this batch last week we did a TikTok live, and I made this whole batch using the Brambleberry Lavender Relaxing Beginner Kit. And since I used a quick mix, which means like all the oils were done ahead of time, I don't know, the prep was like 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just nothing because that big batch of oils had already been done, and all I needed to do was weigh out my lye, stick blend, and since it's one color, there's no math involved really.
Ready to go.
That cleanup took longer than the prep did. And so in terms of how you price your soaps, so you do a lot of, like you said, a lot of prep work, a lot of brain work that goes into your stuff, kind of like a lawyer doesn't necessarily get paid for the 1 hour they work. They actually get paid for the 8 years of schooling and clerking and all of that they did. That's why you're paying them. It's not for the work necessarily. So tell me a little bit about how you price your soaps.
Pricing my soaps is a question that I do get quite often, actually, or if I chime in on a lot of discussions where folks are asking, hey, I've made this, here's my ingredients, how should I price this? And I think of kind of by virtue of where I am and kind of the artisan market in Seattle, I've been able to price fairly high where I feel like I do actually get compensated for my time and my work. My bars range anywhere from usually 12 to 20 per bar. I do small batch kind of artisan soaps. Most of the designs that I make, there's only one loaf of them. So there's between like 12 and 15 of them. And I try not to repeat designs very often. But I wanted to make sure that I captured enough to be able to provide, high quality ingredients, get all the natural things that I want in there, compensate myself for my time a little bit. So just to make sure that I'm not losing money on the business. I'm not, thankfully, because, of my career, I'm not trying to have soap making be my main source of income or to be what I'm kind of using to pay my bills. So I'm really just looking for it to stay in the green, not lose money and cost me money personally. But I think that figuring out your price point and what works for you is one of the more complicated aspects of running a business, is really figuring out where can you compromise on cost versus quality? Where can you compromise on time to find what works best for you to make a sustainable business?
It really is such a it's such a education trying to figure that out, right? Because a lot of people get into soap making for the creativity and for the artistry, right? That
Yeah.
they didn't get into it because they love math, and they didn't get into it because they love economics or accounting.
Exactly,
And so
exactly.
then they all of a sudden are like, okay, wait, I've got this great hobby that actually people are buying stuff, but am I making money? How do I
Right.
figure that out?
Is this costing me money to do? Which is the goal is just not to cost myself money.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you go about teaching yourself how to not lose money at your hobby?
So part of what I do in my career is because I'm our operations director, a lot of my work is also business oversight. So I'm sort of our business manager. So I do our fiscal planning, our budgeting, all of the human resources aspect, kind of a full. I joke that I'm sort of like the CEO of our little program. So everything sort of rolls up into me. So I was lucky to have a decent experience in budgeting and costing and finance and kind of looking at that. So I was able to apply that to my soap making. But I'd say if you don't have that experience, just being able to make yourself a little Excel spreadsheet that keeps track of kind of where you're purchasing your ingredients, how much you're paying for them. You can divide it by the size of the product to get like a cost per ounce or a cost per gram, and then multiplying it out. Because I think a lot of us don't know how much products actually cost us. We might think, oh, well, this is what my oils and lye cost, but what about your fragrance? And what about your stickers that go on your labels? And,
Right.
what about your postage or the boxes that you pack your orders in? So it helped me to do that in a spreadsheet, and then I could figure out kind of what my base expenses were. And I don't really mark things up too much, but trying to keep track of just a little bit of compensation for my time as well. I think having that background in kind of business finance really helped, but you can do it at home even with just a spreadsheet if you just keep track of your receipts and know where you're buying things from.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you was because I think that soap making and selling soap really lends itself well to niche branding. And niche branding is kind of this concept that is, you take a large group of buyers for any sort of product, cars, sweaters, toothpaste, and you break it down by different niches. So whether it's price point or demographic or location or interests, there's always a smaller niche that you can get into, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of you can look at the wine industry and recognize all the different niches just for that. Or toothpaste or deodorant. There's so many things. And so I feel like, do a great job at niche branding and really have figured out kind of who your target kind of client is. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think it's been a bit of luck, honestly, I would say. I sort of started by focusing on what did I want to make? Because if I didn't want to make it, what was the point, right? And I'm drawn to kind of, as you'd mentioned, I'm drawn to these sort of more complicated, more involved kind of artisan, like upscale style designs. And I think that there is a market for that, particularly where I am. I'm lucky to be in Seattle, which is a city that really supports the small business and supports the local makers and, supports the women-owned businesses. And that's been, I think, a blessing and a big part of kind of why I've been able to be successful in looking at focusing on making products that have quality ingredients and fancy designs versus kind of a less expensive or more mass-produced design. I think there's absolutely a place for folks that want to bulk produce and make, large-scale bars that are single pour, simple colors, things like that, or simple swirls. Obviously, there's lots of companies where that is kind of their style, and they do very, very well. And I also didn't want to compete with that market. For me, it is an art. It's not just something to make money on. So I wanted to make art that people wanted to buy. I think I more often have the argument of like, use the pretty soaps, please use them and buy more of them. Instead of people that just buy them and, kind of like me, put them on a shelf in my living room, because I have a ton of soaps that are both mine and from other makers where I've loved the bars and I've kept them. But once I kind of figured out what I wanted to make, then it was a problem of just marketing it. And I think social media has been really helpful for me for that, of making sure I'm engaging regularly, making sure I'm posting content regularly, that's what becomes kind of the second job, I think, is I wish I had a team that would make content for me. It's like trying to remember when I just want to sort of in a hurry bang out a couple of loaves because I only have a few hours, and it's like, no, you should really record them or take pictures or take video. So I think kind of having that focus on making quality soaps with quality ingredients. I also offer a vegan line and an all natural line that has no additives to it, no fragrances or anything like that, has given me, again, in the Seattle area, a really nice little slip into a market that maybe otherwise doesn't exist or is harder to find. My sales vary with I'd say probably about half my orders come from the greater Seattle, kind of Pacific Northwest area, and then the other half come from like the broader US.
That's awesome. And that's, going back to that soap making as a broad scale where you said, hey, some people really do those single colors. Some people just focus on the swirls. There is so many different types of soap you can make, different designs, different markets to serve, right? Organic versus natural, essential oils, for kids, all those bright fruity fragrances and colors, or just like look at Dr. Sasquatch, right? Like, or Dr. Squatch was just selling to men. People that do, like my dad is the #1 psoriasis soap on Amazon because he focuses on one product, one bar of soap. That's all he makes. I designed the recipe for him 20 years ago and he's still selling it. And so there's so many different target and segments to go into. And that's another reason I think that we have such a great community, again, because we are not really in competition with each other.
Right.
Because there's so many different places to go. And really, if anything, we are in competition with mass market, because handcrafted soap does not have more than 3% of the total the soap market in the entire US. Not more than 3%.
Low? Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Isn't that amazing?
I didn't realize it was that low. I know the amount of friends that I've had who are like, oh, I don't use bar soap, I only use body wash. And I'm like, well, humor me and try some. And they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Where can I buy more? Like, that's a big tip that I've used that's really helped my business, I think, is I give stuff away all the time. And maybe it's not the most profitable thing in the immediate circumstance, but in the long run, I think it's really helped me with my business. Like, I keep little samples of scrubs and whips and lotions because I've kind of broadened my line just past soap now.
Right. Yeah.
What just bars of soap.
Are you making? You're getting into candles now, right?
Yeah. Maybe against my will, but I am getting into candles. So I started with soap, and then I expanded to these kind of sugar whips, which are that kind of creamy, frothy whipped soaps. And then just recently added emulsified sugar scrubs. So when you mix those with water, they get lotiony. Those are one of my favorite products. That recipe was a collaboration with Willow Bella Soaps, who were fantastic. She really helped me get that organized and off the ground. Again, collaborating with other soap makers, even though it's a similar product. She's become a wonderful friend of mine and was really helpful in getting that going. And then lotions, so just a body butter lotion. And yeah, like you mentioned, candles. The candles were under duress from my mother. I made some fragrances, some soaps for her in a fragrance that she absolutely adored. And she was like, do you think you could make this in a candle? And I was like, no, Mom, I don't make candles. And she's like, how hard can it be? Figure it out. And so I'd seen the Brambleberry kits, the beginner kits that you guys had just recently started promoting. And I was like, maybe I could make candles.
The creator kits that we just started with?
The bomb, it was bath bombs, candles, and was it soap as well? I know there was a couple of them. Yeah, so I saw the candle one. I was like, you know what? I think I can give this a try. So gave it a try, and it turned out really well. So I just went to visit her last week, and I took her a little box of, this is one that I kept back for myself, but a little box of soy candles in the fragrance that she really liked. She was thrilled to get those. So yeah, having a kind of diversified my product line over the last 2 years, I would say, from just soap to a variety of other bath things. And I just keep samples of everything in my bag. My purse is like 20 pounds because it's full of like bars of soap and jars of sugar scrubs that I give to people all the time.
I travel with handmade soap all the time, and I'm constantly giving it to the flight attendants or whoever.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone who will take it. You never know where business is going to come from. Like cashiers in the grocery store, or the girl at the post office who takes my 50 boxes when I drop off all my shipping orders, or friends at work or colleagues, or like the girl that does my nails, like everyone. I'm just like, oh, here's some handmade soap for you. And it's I think that's really helped just kind of get word out about the business too. I have a lot of return buyers, which is always a huge blessing, and really validating to have folks who buy something and then come back for more because they like it so much.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I have a couple more questions before I let you go. I'm just going to check that he's been monitoring. Are we good? Do we have any questions that need to come in?
Yeah, the only question was...
He says there's a question, so I want to make sure we get that answered before I final questions.
When you're pre-prepping your oils and lye, do you just put one batch in each container or just one large container?
When you're pre-prepping, so you're doing your master batch, do you do one batch per container, or do you do one big batch and then scoop out of the big batch container?
I don't. So each of these little container tubs that I shared is one loaf for me. So I have standardized my mold size. I make 4.5 pound loaves. Basically everything is the same size, and I measure out each one individually. So I'll lay out like 15 or 20 of the big containers and just do all of my shea butter, then all of my coconut oil, then all of, you know, my next ingredient. And then I do the same thing with my liquid oils. Mine are separated by solids and liquids. So my liquids are in here because I personally prefer to use heat transfer for most of my designs. So I'm using the hot lye solution to melt my hard oils instead of like melting them down to liquid first. And then you add in the liquid oils afterwards to cool them down. Some designs, obviously, you can't do that with. For example, like sculpted layer designs, you really have to measure out each layer separately. But a lot of my designs I'll do in this heat transfer method. So I batch one loaf out per container. And same thing when I make like the whipped scrubs or the emulsified scrubs or the lotions, I have smaller containers where one batch goes in a container. I don't have the space to master batch to have everything in one big one. I'm in too small of a home.
That's a good tip and trick in terms of how to make your production work for you by doing the same repeated act over and over again, because you get in a production line, and here's how you do a production line.
Yeah, and weighing out ingredients is probably my least favorite part of soap making. It's the thing that I like bribe my friends to help me with pretty regularly. And so when I can just take an afternoon and get all of that done and batch out maybe like 2 releases worth of tubs, then I don't have to worry about that when I'm feeling creative and I want to make. I don't have to kind of slog through this part that I don't really like. I can just grab a batch and I can go with it. And all I have to weigh out is my lye, my water, and my fragrance.
Well, that's a great tip. So I am curious, what's your favorite Brambleberry fragrance?
I have 3 of them actually. Okay. Prepped for this very question. So my all-time favorite, I think, is Backwoods Hike, which is one of the newer fragrances, I think, from Brambleberry. I first got this maybe a year and a half ago, and it's this really lovely kind of woodsy, it's like woods meets somebody wearing a nice cologne. Right. It's kind of how I describe it. So it's got those undertones of woods and fir and balsam and kind of foresty fragrances, but also has kind of some higher notes that are a little bit more fragrant and floral and cologne-y. Behaves really well in soap, one of my all-time favorites. My other one, and I think this is one of your favorites as well, Anne-Marie, is Energy, which is a super bright citrus. It's absolutely wonderful. I use that in everything. It's really popular in my sugar scrubs and the emulsified scrubs. Everyone loves that, like super citrus, I think, first thing in the morning. And then my third one is Sea Salt and Lily, which is a really, really nice kind of oceany floral blend. I found that ocean scents sometimes can behave a little bit badly. They can be a little bit challenging to work with, and Sea Salt and Lily doesn't fall into that category. It behaves really well, and it does kind of smell like that salty ocean breeze with notes of some fresh flowers being blown down for you. So those are my top 3 picks for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, Energy, I created that fragrance like 20 years ago because I had smelled something that I loved on vacation, and then I went about recreating it, and it's literally, I mean, it stops trace in cold process soap in its tracks. And so I found myself for years, whenever I was trying to come up with a recipe for the blog or for Soap Queen TV back in the day, if it was a difficult one, I would just, all right, here we go. Energy.
It's
like,
so good.
Don't try anything else, because it always worked and it always was great for swirls and all of that. So that's awesome. So final question is, you're an experienced soap maker. You've been doing this a while. What is your best advice? And it could be more than one advice for new soap makers.
Oh, have fun with it. I think it's kind of my first and overarching, not technical piece of advice is just have fun with it. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, what's the point? So finding what you like and then practicing it. I think from a technical standpoint, especially for newer soap makers, my advice would be just to start simple. And I think everyone hears that and they kind of want to dive right into really complicated designs. But start by learning the basics. You know, either get a tested and true recipe, I think is going to be the best step if you're brand new, is to find one that people have tested. It's been ran through a lye calculator. You know that it works. And then when you want to start making your own, do it incrementally. Start changing one thing, then another, instead of kind of jumping in and going off the rails right off the beginning. I think you'll set yourself up for success there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Soap making is a science. So you don't want to make too many variables at once.
I joke that it's kind of chemistry meets art meets baking. It's a little bit of all of these different things, and the measurements matter. And so kind of taking your time with it and learning how different things impact your recipe or impact the final product. Like I know when I did a lot of product testing, and I was blessed to have, again, Whitney give me a wonderful starter recipe that's become changed down the line, but is now kind of the backbone of my soap products. But when I wanted to start changing things, it was tweaking something in a small batch and then seeing what it did. How did it impact the final product? How did it impact trace? So For me, it's always been really methodical, and that's what I think has been successful for me. But really, just having fun with it and enjoying what you're doing is the key. If you're not enjoying it, then I think what's the point?
Why bother? Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to talk to me about niche branding and talk to Brambleberry customers. And happy President's Day. And if you're a Brambleberry customer, just a reminder, there's no time like the present to order, because the President's Day sale ends today. So if you've thought about trying the creator kits that Roxanne mentioned or anything else, today's the day to do it. And Roxanne, remind us all where people can find you to both buy your products, but watch your YouTube channel. And
sure. So my business is Caprica Soapery, which obviously I think you guys can see my Instagram here. I'm most active on Instagram, but I also have a Facebook page and a YouTube channel, which is Caprica Soapery as well. My products are released in scheduled batch releases. So my next one will probably be sometime in March. I don't have a shop that's open kind of all the time, just by virtue of my day job. And that way I can make sure that I get all my orders, they're prepped, they're ready, and I can batch everything and send it all out at once. I will say, if you do want to shop, the releases are pretty competitive, so be ready to go right when they go live. I've had lots of sad emails of folks who've missed out on things. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting maybe some interaction with some folks I haven't talked to before, making some new connections. And if anyone has questions or comments or wants to reach out, by all means, please feel free to. And then definitely get your order into Brambleberry. I know I got mine in this morning for probably more things than I have space for at the moment, but it was such a good deal, I didn't want to miss it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a friend. Thanks for being a customer. And until next time, everyone that's watching, happy soaping.